it's Jack from Cultaholic.com, and good news, everyone, as Professor Farnsworth would say, because there's more news, everyone. More news today to talk about in the wide world of professional wrestling. We've got news stories from all over the place, so without any further ado, let's take a look at those lovely little headlines. First of all, we take a look at WWE's reported plans for the recently released Drake Maverick. Next up, there's been an update on when WWE expect to resume live touring. And finally, Britt Baker has talked to Chris Jericho about an incident involving Triple H and Stephanie McMahon. So first of all, let's talk about Drake Maverick, who has definitely garnered the most attention out of all of the WWE releases so far. Part of that is due to that very emotional, very sincere, very passionate video that he put out on Twitter shortly after the news of his release. And just as a quick recap, he revealed in that video that he would still be competing in WWE for a few matches before his release was officially done and he was let go from the company. So he still had a few matches to fulfill. Those matches were in the Interim Cruiserweight Championship tournament, the winner of which, of course, becomes the Interim Cruiserweight Champion and then presumably has a match with the actual Cruiserweight Champion Jordan Devlin at some point down the line. So the long and short of it is, in both a kayfabe sense and a real life sense, I guess, Drake Maverick has to win that tournament to stay in WWE. And last night on NXT, well, he lost his first match in the tournament against Jake Atlas, which is kind of going the way that you'd expect because he's being released, so surely he wouldn't be picking up too many wins. He certainly wouldn't be expected to win the whole thing. However, it wasn't so much the result of the match, but the presentation of Drake Maverick that I think has confused a lot of people and has actually started up some rumours that WWE may have changed their track when it comes to Drake's future. What happened last night on NXT after that loss to Jake Atlas was, well, we saw Jake Atlas being interviewed in the parking lot, sort of like a post-victory interview, and Drake Maverick walked past and Jake Atlas stopped him and spoke some words of encouragement. There was also an interview with Drake Maverick sitting in a stairwell where he was talking about how he needs to win the other matches in this tournament. Now, as a lot of people have rightly pointed out, this is very strange because if Maverick is indeed being released, then why are they hyping up the fact that he's this huge underdog who needs to win to keep his job? Well, I think there's three potential things that could be going on here. One, it's always been a work from the start and Maverick was never going to be released. I think that's unlikely, and I think that if that was true as well, it would be incredibly callous behaviour from WWE to make a storyline about somebody being released at a time when people genuinely are losing their jobs. I think that is unlikely though. Option number two, Maverick was indeed released, but after that video gained so much attention, WWE changed their minds, re-signed him, and he is indeed going to go on and win this damn tournament. Now that is unlikely in a kayfabe sense because he's already lost his first match, but he's not out of the tournament yet. It's a round robin affair, so he's still in the tournament and still has at least 2 more matches to compete in. And option number three, and this is the one that's been reported today on Wrestling Observer Radio by Dave Meltzer, he suggests that the whole thing is still totally legit and that Maverick is still going to be released after his matches are done. Meltzer said, as of this afternoon, he was under the same deal as Sarah Logan, which is that they're going to use them, but they're still fired. So that seems to be the case. It seems as though if Meltzer's report is accurate, that Maverick is still going to be released after this tournament is all said and done. Now that's confusing in and of itself, because why on earth then are they trying to raise Maverick's stock even though he's going to be released at the end of it? Why are they trying to raise the hype around him if they're going to let him go anyway? If we contrast this with how they treated Jon Moxley in the weeks building up to his release, it's very different, isn't it? They're portraying Maverick as very noble and almost unjustly treated, whereas Moxley was turned into a bit of a joke character. He was losing to EC3, he was getting punched in the face by Nia Jax. They were doing everything they could to make Moxley look like a loser before he left and inevitably went to New Japan and AEW. Whereas in Maverick's case, once he leaves, if he's given a valiant effort and gone down fighting in this tournament, which is what Meltzer's report seems to suggest, that seems a very strange move for WWE because they'll effectively be giving one of their competitors a really hot superstar. So strange developments there, but apparently the news is that Maverick is still going to be released after this tournament is done. And while we're on the topic of releases, now let's talk about Fightful, who have a report on WWE's decision-making process when it comes to deciding who to release, or when they were deciding who they were going to release last week. Specifically, this involves NXT superstars. Now, Fightful have said, "We were told that the primary line of thinking in releasing NXT talent were people who had expressed their dissatisfaction creatively or had had long tenures there without plans." So, two categories there. People who'd already expressed dissatisfaction, that makes sense. You know, why would WWE release someone else over people who've already expressed a desire to leave? That fits the mold of people like Deonna Purrazzo, who seemed to be very relieved when she was released, and maybe Tanara Conti as well. If you remember, shortly before her rumoured release, Conti was apparently released a month or two ago, but then showed up at the next set of tapings or house shows wearing a t-shirt that said released. So that was revealed to be a work. Although whether WWE just changed their minds and did a 180 at the last second, we don't know. But this could have stemmed, I guess, from a backstage situation where Conti was also dissatisfied. They thought about releasing her and then went, no, hang on, we'll run with this whole released storyline, which in the end didn't really go anywhere. And the other category is people who've been in NXT for a long time without any sort of direction. The implication there being, I guess, people like Cassius Ono or Chris Hero, who recently released that video on Twitter, which is kind of signaling his impending return to the independent scene as Chris Hero. It's the death of Cassius Ono, the superstar, and the return of Chris Hero, the highly thought of indie wrestler. That one surprised me, to be honest, because I thought that Ono would be kept on in kind of a coaching or a training role at the Performance Center, but no, he has apparently been let go and is apparently very excited to return to the indie scene and hopefully have some excellent matches, as he did before his WWE run, or in between his two WWE runs. Next up, let's talk about when WWE are looking or aiming to run live tours again in front of crowds. Obviously this is subject to whenever these restrictions are lifted in America and I guess on a global basis. But yeah, WrestlingRumors.net have done a bit of research and found out a few interesting details. So Chris Featherston from Wrestling Rumors has contacted a few venues and stuff like that and tried to work out some dates and whether shows are still being planned to go ahead in the near future. So apparently the SmackDown originally scheduled for Columbus, Ohio on Friday, April 10th has been moved to June 12th, which in my mind is quite surprising. That's quite soon, isn't it? I guess I was expecting that live wrestling wouldn't return for a little bit longer. Featherston spoke to a rep who apparently confirmed that WWE are still very much planning to run that show in June. They've also updated their live schedule to show that SmackDown is going to be the first road event outside of the Performance Center and Full Sail, where the tapings have been held since the outbreak. Featherston has also confirmed that WWE are still planning to run events in the future, other ones in June, including NXT in Tampa, Largo and Fort Pierce, all within Florida, which I guess puts a different angle on things because wrestling is still deemed an essential service there, on June 13th, 20th and 26th. But it is still pretty shocking news because this is again not just the taping of a show, this is live events that they're planning to run in front of crowds as soon as June. And also they are planning to run an event in early July overseas in Osaka, Japan. Now that one may be especially optimistic given that it would involve, you know, international travel and the restrictions that are in place in a different country. So that one to me is especially optimistic, but you never know what's going to happen in the future. We will keep on updating you as this situation develops. Next up, a little bit of news from this week on Twitter, which involves a certain wrestler formerly known as Hideo Itami. I am of course referring to the now New Japan wrestler Kenta. Kenta recently quote retweeted a fan's video from @GrappleClips on Twitter, which shows Kenta hitting the go to sleep on "It looks like Misawa" in Noah. And Kenta quote retweeted that and put, "This is my very first go to sleep before somebody used it in WWE," obviously referring to CM Punk, who would soon adopt that move as his finisher. And then Kenta got into a little bit of an argument with some fans of CM Punk. Now it is worth clarifying here that Kenta is right. He did use the move first, but the arguments that ensued were from some pretty rabid CM Punk fans who were suggesting that Punk did the move better. So somebody replied, "No one did it better than this man," with a gif of CM Punk, and then Kenta said, "I don't give a F," and then censored himself, which is nice for this video. And let me tell you one more fact. I always open my arms for that someone to pay royalties to me. Kenta's just not pulling any punches right now. Kenta then had some words to say about physical attractiveness, because somebody said @CM Punk is better than you, probably hoping that Punk would reply saying, "Thank you very much, mate, you're my best friend, let me slide in your DMs and we can meet up sometime." Kenta was having none of that though. He quote retweeted that and put, "Even though I'm better looking than him." Whoa, very subjective there. Both very attractive men. Let me know which one you think's better looking in the... What am I talking about here? Now, the reason this is newsworthy isn't just because Kenta is addressing the fact that himself and CM Punk shared a finisher, but also the fact that, of course, Will Ospreay recently went out on a bit of a limb and challenged CM Punk to a match at Wrestle Kingdom next January to give everybody something to look forward to, I think he said, given the ongoing circumstances. Now, CM Punk didn't reply affirming or denying that this match would be one that he would be interested in making go ahead, but before Ospreay made that challenge, Punk did talk in an interview, I remember, about people who could tempt him back into the squared circle, and Will Ospreay was certainly one of them. Now, of course, that match would take place in New Japan. Ospreay is signed to New Japan. He specifically wanted it for Wrestle Kingdom. It's a match that's big enough to headline Wrestle Kingdom, for God's sake, although often Wrestle Kingdom is headlined by the IWGP Heavyweight Championship match, but they do often run co-main events, such as Jericho versus Kenny Omega from a couple of years ago. Now, if this match were to take place, that would mean that CM Punk would be in the same promotion as Kenta, and that could potentially lead to a big old dream match, Go to Sleep versus Go to Sleep, CM Punk versus Kenta, and I think that's one that we'd all like to see. But again, that is just massive speculation from myself, because first of all, we need to hear back from CM Punk about that Will Ospreay match. And finally, let's talk about Dr. Britt Baker, DMD, who has been on Talk as Jericho recently and was talking about that incident that happened in NXT when she was caught on camera while under contract in AEW at a takeover event, reacting to her real-life boyfriend Adam Cole taking a massive bump. Britt first talked about basically the process of attending a takeover event while working for a rival promotion in AEW. She put, "So I've always asked ahead of time, either the Bucks or Tony Khan, I've always said, is it okay if I go? And it's to the point where Tony's like, Britt, stop asking me. Of course you can always go. Why would we not want you to go and support your boyfriend?" Which is very nice and very logical. She said that the first time she went to the show, it was totally fine. She was in her little comp seat and nothing went wrong. But then the second time, she's got this to say. The second time, which I knew Adam Cole was winning the championship title, so I definitely wanted to go, and I didn't just want to sit backstage and watch it on a TV screen. I was like, is there any way I could watch it in the crowd? She goes on, so I'm in my seat, everything's good, and then for his match, they moved me and said, hey, you'll be fine here because you're behind the commentary table and the match is in the cage, the camera's not going to come here at all. And I was like, okay, that makes sense. So they moved her prior to Adam Cole's match. And then of course we know what happens. Cole takes the massive bump. Baker is caught in the crowd looking shocked and concerned, and then they I think they made a joke about that on Dynamite soon after. But yeah, that was a pretty interesting moment, and it caused a bit of a furore online. She says, I didn't even know until I got backstage in Gorilla, went to check on Adam, and Triple H came up to me right away, and he was like, oh, I'm so sorry, we didn't mean for that to happen. I'm kind of like, wait, what? And he's like, yeah, we got you on camera with your reaction to the bump, I'm so sorry. The head of production didn't know who you were. Sounds like it could be the truth, also sounds like it could be a lie, especially because she was moved prior to the match itself. Baker goes on, do I believe that? I don't know, but he was very apologetic to me, super nice. Him and Stephanie were both so sorry about that. I hope you don't get in trouble, they said, and Tony didn't care at all because after that night, I was the top Google search of the entire show. So I guess it did work nicely, getting a bit of publicity for AEW. I don't know what the motivation would have been for NXT to try and deliberately catch Britt Baker on camera because, as I just mentioned there, it caused more of a stir and it created more publicity for a rival promotion. So they could well be telling the truth, but she was at pains to stress that Triple H and Stephanie were both very, very nice to her, had no problem with her being at the event, and were very apologetic after the incident. So there we go. My recommended match is the men's War Games match from the previous NXT TakeOver War Games, and that's the news for this video. Thank you very much for watching. I've been Jack from Cultaholic.com. Stay safe out there, stay positive, keep your heads up, and I'll see you very soon.